Alright, so usually the highest kill streak I get is the clip I open with, and I did get an almost unfairly close 19 streak at one point, but I found this clip to be a lot more exhilarating. I see a medic on fire and know it's my time to shine, but he dips around just too early. But luckily, another medic on fire just happens to walk into my crosshairs. Then there's the scout, this pyro, this soldier, this other soldier who teleports behind me somehow, and then I take out soldier number 3, and right here is where the magic happens. I whip out the old shotgun to take out this invisible spy, prove heavy counter sniper by beating him to death, absolutely demolish yet another medic, and manage to kill yet another soldier, and scare off a soldier-medic combo, and live to tell the tale. I'd like to personally thank my own medic for making this moment possible, and also, I'd like to thank today's sponsor. Do you hate megalomaniacal corporations looking at all of your internet data and selling it to other megalomaniacal corporations so that you get ads for things you were literally just talking about out loud in the vicinity of your phone, which wasn't even turned on at the time? Then you need ExpressVPN for the privacy, security, and freedom you deserve online. Using ExpressVPN hides your IP address from big tech companies, and hides your web searches from your internet provider or network admin. And it also relocates your IP address to a completely different country so you can get access to all the media content that your country doesn't let you have. Like how Harry Potter is only available on Netflix in the UK because the UK needs to find a new way to screw us over now that we're not the colonies anymore. It's like unlocking a second version of your streaming service of choice with all the new content it offers. I use it because I don't like the idea of being watched constantly by my computer like it's 1984. So having ExpressVPN gives me some extra peace of mind. This link, expressvpn.com/Fasoas, will be in the description below, and if you click on it, you can get 3 months of ExpressVPN totally free. Check it out and see if it's for you. And now, let's get back to the video. Welcome to Bad Weapon Academy, where we take a look at the worst weapons TF2 has to offer, and I show you how to best utilize them. Much like the candy cane, this was a weapon that I recently became unsure of when thinking of whether or not to give it a Bad Weapon Academy episode. But after using it for a time, I think it's at least somewhat deserved. I've gotten some shit in the past for my inability to pronounce a weapon named by cheese-eating surrender monkeys, so for the great leader Xi Jinping, I'll try to get this one right for the sake of my social credit score. The Huo-Long heater is a weapon that reminds me a lot of the backscatter, but not nearly to the same extreme degree. But it reminds me of it in the sense that, in a lot of situations, I wonder if I would be doing the same or better with the stock minigun or Tomislav. So let's do the old stats thing and see why that is. The main draw of the heater is that while you spin up, you create a ring of fire around yourself. The ring of fire appears around you about 2 seconds from the point where you initiate your spin up. This will deal periodic damage and inflict afterburn in a radius around you on all enemies that end up touching the effect, even damaging enemies underwater, which I think is kinda funny. On top of this, the gun will deal plus 25% damage to burning enemies, which really encourages up close and personal encounters. However, this is offset by an overall 10% damage penalty, which when put together is kinda difficult to calculate thanks to Heavy's damage ramp up the longer you're spun up and the minigun's constant stream of fire as opposed to a single shot of burst damage. Overall, with the two stats factored together, it comes out to a 13% damage increase if the enemy is on fire compared to stock. Not nearly as extreme as the Brass Beast 20% flat increase, but the downsides aren't nearly as extreme either. The final stat is the biggest downside, however. Keeping the ring of fire up by staying revved up will consume your ammo passively by 4 ammo per second. This means you'll have to stay revved up for 50 seconds to drain your ammo by just revving up alone, but that's when you don't even consider firing your weapon on top of that. Assuming you fire until you run out of ammo, the heater gives you 15 seconds of uninterrupted fire compared to 25 seconds on the stock minigun or Tomislav. That doesn't sound like such a big deal, but when you consider just how much you stay revved up without shooting as heavy, you realize that those seconds you're losing really start to add up. So let's talk about these upsides and downsides. The Ring of Fire is a really cool, unique mechanic for a minigun. However, I found the impact it has on gameplay to be a bit lacking. For starters, the range. I understand that the range on this can't be too big because that makes Heavy's effective range this big AoE circle around him. But here's my contention with the Ring of Fire. At the range where the ring is active, you are the strongest class in the game already. So do you really need that extra 13% damage bonus? Not to mention, I found it pretty difficult to actually make use of the ring to catch enemies on fire to even get the damage bonus. 2 seconds is a decently long windup time to get this effect to activate, meaning while it is sometimes effective, it's not the best for ambushes around a corner. And it's pretty useless in open combat where Heavy already struggles. Not to mention, because you're so devastating at close range, a lot of enemies are going to stay out of that range, Ring of Fire or otherwise. This does make you better at your most effective range, but your most effective range, sadly, isn't the range you're always going to be fighting people in as Heavy. The best situations I've found myself in with this are when enemies like Demo Knights just kind of stupidly walk into the fire, or when an enemy pyro would accidentally launch me towards his own teammates with an air blast, which was pretty funny. And in one more situation, jumping on people from above. If a map gives you any degree of verticality, this is a really fun way to ambush people. Not only do not a lot of players look up to begin with, but the drop time of most falls is enough to offset the time it takes to charge up the Ring of Fire, and your mobility while falling is much faster than while you're moving on the ground. Meaning it's the perfect ambush tool to close the gap on enemies in these situations. Maps like Barn Blitz, Thunder Mountain, Badwater, certain parts of Swiftwater and Borneo, and some others like Mountain Lab are all great examples of this. For more horizontal maps like a lot of King of the Hill or 5CP maps, it really isn't the best option. Open maps also aren't your friend. Typically the more choke heavy the better, since it increases the odds of people needing to enter your Ring of Fire, or even the likelihood of them stumbling into it on accident. One downside of needing high ground is that the Ring of Fire can actually block your vision of what you're firing at, making it a lot more difficult to aim if you're aiming down. Now, there is the argument to be made that the Ring of Fire acts as an effective deterrent, and that's not entirely incorrect. But again, because you just shred people at close range as a Heavy, most people know better than to come anywhere near this range, meaning the only class you're realistically deterring is a Spy. And Spy has 4 options for dealing with this. 1, he can simply jump over the Ring of Fire. 2, he can equip the kunai and just stab you without even caring, since the kunai extinguishes afterburn effects upon backstabbing and healing. 3, he can time it just right so that he never touches your fire to begin with, since the fire comes out in waves. Or 4, he can equip literally any knife except the Spysicle and just stab you without even caring, because why bother having self-preservation instincts when you're gonna die after every kill anyway? Or if you're using the Dead Ringer. This means it isn't really a fire and forget weapon when it comes to spies the way something like the Razorback is. You're still going to have to be as vigilant as ever. If you do manage to catch a spy out as he's in your ring, you have what's pretty much a guaranteed dead spy on your hands, which is definitely a bonus. One last downside about the Ring of Fire before we move on. You know how wearing an unusual as certain classes is basically putting up a big neon sign over your head that says, "Please, for the love of God, shoot me right in my fucking head"? Well, imagine that, but anytime you rev up, your entire body is an unusual effect. So on top of how fucking loud this gun is, once you rev up, you announce to every sniper, demo, soldier, whoever, that's exactly where you are. Even if you're behind cover, since the Ring of Fire will clip through it. Considering this weapon does so well with ambushes, this can make your job fairly difficult, especially compared to a weapon like the Tomislav, which has heavy jump scares as a built-in advantage. For snipers especially, this can be pretty disastrous, since you've essentially done half the sniper's job for him by giving away your position and actively making a big flashing target out of yourself. So the extra damage is the next stat to break down. It's definitely an interesting upside, being able to essentially combo people as Heavy, but again, the Ring of Fire isn't the best tool to get the job done. This leaves the job primarily to your friendly pyros or the occasional Cowmangler soldier, and how they go about lighting people on fire is really out of your control, as well as if you'll even have any pyros at all. You could queue up with a friendly pyro to ensure at least someone is going to do fire damage to get you what you need, but that's not a guaranteed scenario. If you do, or you happen to run into a pyro that's willing to cooperate with you, then the crowd control flare guns like the detonator and that other one will be your best friends, They can light multiple people on fire for a good amount of time from a safe distance for the pyro. This lets you take advantage of the extra damage at mid to long range, or in the range just outside of your ring of fire, which is where it'll be making the most difference anyway, and where I found the most success with this effect. However, relying on someone else for you to do extra damage, a pyro in particular, is part of what makes the Sun on a Stick such a meme weapon, so And also, like, if you're gonna have someone queuing with you, and you're playing heavy, just get a pocket medic. It's way better. Like it's way better. I have to say though, in those moments where you do manage to work in tandem with a friendly pyro, it's really fun and satisfying. The way this upside is listed on the stats makes it look a lot better than it actually is. The 10% damage penalty and the 25% bonus on burning targets stack multiplicatively, meaning it only comes out to a 13% bonus over stock. If it was a flat 25%, that would be pretty awesome, but it's so situational that I don't think it would be that bad balance-wise. As it stands, it's not an amazing difference or anything. Honestly, I kinda struggle to notice the difference in a lot of situations. Heavy is a difficult class to judge in regards to feedback. You almost have to test how much of a difference you're making in a controlled environment, which isn't always indicative of the real game. And that goes for the damage penalty and the damage increase. Speaking of that damage penalty, it's not the biggest deal in the world, but it can still rob you of kills. I see it as kind of being in a similar state to the Overdoses 10% damage penalty. Sure, a small number on a small number doesn't make that big of a difference per shot, but over time it adds up. And on a DPS-centric class like Heavy, it can feel frustrating to essentially lose kills over this feature. You can kind of think of it like, if you're going to be doing single to low double-digit damage, then every point of damage counts. But again, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's not like the Liberty Launcher's damage penalty where you may as well be hitting people with a t-shirt cannon filled with balloon animals, or the Natasha, which basically needs the awful slowdown in order to kill people. But I've definitely noticed it, especially at long range, and especially when factored with Heavy's damage ramp up on spin up. That shit will make your bullets do 2 damage a pop at long range until you're maxed out. Then they do a nice spicy 4 damage. The last thing to talk about stats wise is the passive ammo drain while you're revved up. This is definitely the aspect of the gun that most people complain about, and for good reason. See, ammo conservation is something you don't really need to worry about, ever, as Heavy, but now with the heater, it's something you constantly have to deal with. Every time you rev up, it's like the time you can shoot people is sinking down an hourglass, and every time you shoot people, your sustainability drops through the floor as you constantly have to check around for ammo packs or dispensers. This brings us nicely to the mode that everyone uses this thing on, Payload Offense. Just play Payload Offense. Hug the cart, never let go, and you don't have to worry about anything. As long as you're vigilant to spies and snipers, you can just sit on the cart and watch as the enemy desperately tries to hold together a front line. But let me ask you this, is this strategy being made any more effective by the use of the heater? Well, you still have to be just as worried about spies as you normally are, and the sounds it makes can actually mask their decloak sounds, especially compared to the Tomislav, making it harder to avoid them. Assuming they know how to bypass your ring of fire, so not there. You're just as ineffective against snipers as you normally are, with the added bonus of doing less damage to them at long range, which just gives them a larger window of time to headshot you, and the giant flashing sign begging them to do so, so not there either. It doesn't make the cart go any faster. It doesn't let you take advantage of the ring of fire to light up enemies very often, since no one's going to want to fight a Heavy with effective passive health regen at point blank range. So here's my pitch. The Huo-Long heater does not make pushing the cart as Heavy more effective. Pushing the cart as Heavy is just really, really fucking strong. There's a reason having multiple Heavies on the payload cart is basically a guaranteed victory for offense. You're constantly able to keep a stream of damage out towards the front line, you're constantly keeping the front line moving forward, which keeps defensive classes like Engineer, Sniper, and Heavy playing catch up, meaning the defense crumbles. Does the heater make this any easier? Any more effective? Not really. The payload cart just acts as a mobile dispenser that eliminates this ammo consumption weakness. You don't get to walk into people walking at you the way you do on defense, so in this situation, you're just using a minigun with 10% less damage that might make spies slightly easier to track down after they backstab you. So yeah. The reason you'll see me consistently top score as a heater heavy in this video isn't because the strategy really works well for the heater specifically, it's because it works for heavy in general. There was a round I played on Pier where I got 1 kill the entire round and still managed to place second on the scoreboard just because I was humping the cart. And the only person I scored lower than was a short circuit spamming engineer doing the same thing. So that covers a lot of it. After all that, you can hopefully see why I consider this to be in the same ballpark as the backscatter. I think the instances it can be situationally better than stock are more common than with the backscatter, where you had to be right behind 3 light classes in a row breathing in their fart gas. Here, you just have to be up in their face at all, which is where you're already at your best, or have a friendly pyro lighting people on fire, which is more often the case than not. It's situational, but not so situational that it's rarely, if ever, worth using. But when it's being a worse version of stock, it's just being a worse version of stock, and there's not much you can do about it. What you can do is try to maximize the situations where you can ambush people. For this reason, I found myself running the second banana a lot. Since this gun does seem to encourage ambushes, or at the very least point blank range combat, it means it puts you deep into enemy lines, or at least big groups as heavy, which is pretty damn dangerous, so being able to heal yourself as often as possible for as much as possible is something I found to be very beneficial. As far as the ammo draining is concerned, you could also run a shotgun in order to still have some means of doing damage, even if you get caught without ammo, but I wouldn't say this is as advantageous as it is with the Brass Beast. It's probably the second most viable minigun to run a shotgun with though. And if you want to roleplay as a fat pyro by torching people with the ring of fire and finishing them off with your shotgun, then I can't stop you. The shotguns are definitely more effective on maps where engineers aren't as common and ammo packs are harder to come by, so I would say some Koth or 5CP maps work out best here. If you do choose to run a shotgun, then my recommendation for a melee is the Killing Gloves of Boxing, for reasons that the intro hopefully made obvious. Otherwise, for the same reason that running the banana is a good idea, I'd also recommend the Gloves of Running Urgently. These things are lifesavers, and I would say easily the best melee to pair with this gun. Not only can you use them offensively to get yourself into a proper ambush position as quickly as possible, but once you're done, you can use them defensively to get yourself out to safety quickly. This is especially useful if you're at low health when you need to make a break for it, as they essentially have no downsides if you're at 100 health or less. They're a fantastic getaway tool, and if you're running low on ammo, it's easy to whip them out, run over to the nearest ammo pack or dispenser, and get back in the fight as quickly as you can. This works especially well for ammo packs dropped by enemies out in the open where you're vulnerable to snipers. The Fists of Steel also work for this purpose, but I found the Groove to be just as, if not more effective in certain scenarios. I ended up liking them so much I caved and crossed another strange festive weapon off the list. The ammo consumption penalty is what you'll need to keep an eye on the most if you're not on payload offense, or a strong defensive hold with a nearby dispenser. If you are in this situation, then your Ring of Fire's effects as a deterrent are at their strongest. A spy will definitely think twice about sapping a sentry nest if there's a heavy who can incinerate him without even looking at him guarding it. But this isn't exactly the most fun way to play. I'd say that also extends to the cart humper heavy. Like, oh sure, it's effective, but god damn is it boring. Just sit on the cart for 3 minutes and sometimes shoot at people if they get into your range, as your team has all the fun taking advantage of the momentum you're creating for them. Yay! I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I feel like that's an issue with this weapon in that the playstyles it encourages to get around your ammo consumption are really boring and tedious. The ambushes are really, really fun. Getting in deep with your friendly pyros is really, really fun, but the turtling, not so much. Anyway, the ammo consumption will take away a few of your resources as heavy. For one, it discourages you from staying revved up for too long. This has a couple of issues in that it can result in you getting caught off guard more often. You can't play proactively nearly as well. You have to play much more reactively. It also means you're being penalized by Heavy's damage ramp up over time. See, all miniguns start off with a 50% damage penalty that decreases over the course of about a second of having the gun revved up. so this means your minus 10% damage penalty becomes a lot more harsh when you're constantly having to unrev your gun just to keep yourself in the fight. Not so bad for those ambush situations where you catch people on fire, but in regular combat, it can be frustrating since people have so much more time to react to you, meaning you can't even consistently rely on dead enemies dropping ammo packs, which is normally part of what makes ammo management such a non-issue for heavies. The second and most important thing you sacrifice is time. Time to set up an attack, to rev up before you engage the enemy, to stay revved up before you even know you're about to engage, just in case. All of this is put on a timer. You can't hide around a corner and wait for people to walk into you. You can't hold a position that enemies are going to come through without being aware that slowly but surely your sustainability is draining. Using this gun can be stressful, man. It's like putting existential dread into a game as a gameplay mechanic. I'm so not used to running out of ammo as heavy. What I'm used to is being able to stand on the point, revved up, whipping around looking for spies or flanking scouts, and ready to attack anyone who comes at me. Is this such a massive problem that it makes the gun unusable? No, not at all. But outside of those ambush situations, I think it's a gun that really struggles to find its place. Even in MVM, it's not the best option, though it's definitely a solid one, especially if you're running a pyro as well, but even then you can hold your own without one. The gas passer largely makes the upside worthless against small robots since it disintegrates them instantly, but against giants, having that damage bonus is pretty nice. And since robots are fucking stupid and have no souls and just run straight into you with no self-preservation instincts, you can take advantage of the Ring of Fire way more often. You can buy ammo capacity or stick around your friendly dispenser to never have to worry about the downside either. You can also upgrade your movement speed just so you can move towards the robots more effectively to get them caught in your Ring of Fire more often. And when you get that zen moment of having a buff banner or crits Krieg medic on you while you're shooting an on fire enemy, oh, it's beautiful. But when I compare that to the constant 20% damage increase the Brass Beast gets, it starts to look a little pale. Still hardly a bad choice, I mean, hey, it's not the Tomislav, and I suppose that just about covers it. The heater is a weapon that, like the backscatter, I find to be not often worth using over stock. But I do see the benefits for what they are, and it's much more fun to use than the backscatter, and certainly more fun to discuss and dissect. But I find it more frustrating to use than stock due to the ammo drain. Even with that said, Heavy was my least played class before I got the footage for this video and he overtook Medic, and I still had a lot of fun with it. Backstabbing clueless snipers with fire as a Heavy is something you just can't get with other weapons, but it's still just a bit underwhelming, so how can we fix that? I'm not sure if there's a simple solution, or if it even needs a major buff. A lot of the balance choices around this weapon are pretty smart. Like, I don't think the Ring of Fire should be a free resource, so making it consume ammo is a smart move. And the range of the ring isn't so much that it hinders a lot of classes that you're weak to, but it's also so small that I think it's mainly meant to be a spy deterrent that doesn't even work half the time. It's a tricky thing to rebalance, but we can give it a try. I think something kind of extreme would be to have a meter that charges with damage, like the soda popper or the banners. Once you activate the charge, you start to fire incendiary rounds which light enemies on fire for the duration of the charge at the cost of double ammo consumption, which fits the theme of the weapon and is a suitable downside for hit scan fire damage. This would not only give you far more opportunities to take advantage of your boosted fire damage, but also give it a niche as an active sniper counter, which I think Heavy could use since outside of Engineer, he's the only class who doesn't really have something like that. All of his are passive, really. If that's too strong, then maybe drop the current damage penalty a bit lower, like 15% to make up for it. Another slightly extreme option is to enhance the ability to jump on enemies to catch them off guard. Let's say if you jump from a high enough point, your Ring of Fire's area of effect and maybe even damage is briefly doubled, enabling you to catch even more enemies on fire and be even more effective. Being able to drop out of the sky like a human Tunguska event would be pretty sick, and make this tactic even more fun than it already is. Otherwise, I'd say change the damage penalty to only apply to non-burning enemies. That way you get the full 25% bonus on lit enemies instead of just 13. This gives it way more punch in those specific scenarios while still keeping it in check the majority of the time. I find it kind of interesting that proponents of this weapon will say that the minus 10% damage penalty is just sort of this whatever stat, like it doesn't even make that much of a difference, but then the 13% damage increase is totally worth it, even with how situational it is. Like, it's almost the same difference in damage, so either both of them matter or neither of them do. Either that, or the simplest change of all, make it so that you can just turn off the Ring of Fire and activate it manually instead of having it be passive. Sometimes you need to just rev up for suppressive fire or an ambush, and I'm not really sure if you should be punished for that. Then just let me festivize it, and I'll have a full professional killstreak strange festive heavy loadout that actually kind of has synergy. Anyway, that's it for now. The heater is honestly probably the best bad weapon in the game, meaning it's all downhill from here, especially considering what we've got left. So for now, while we're still playing with something usable, go out there and roast the enemies into some delicious Chinese food and tell them Fish sent ya. Ooh. Revolver, conscientious objector, winger.